and give your things to others. We must then be vessels through whom God can work his grace, through whom God can provide his grace in giving and helping others. I know the mindset so much in American culture in particular is that we save and we save for retirement, we save and we save to give to our children. But if that isn't God's will, are we really helping ourselves or helping them or hurting them? Now, the scriptures do have a principle. They say the parents save to help provide a home for the children. Isn't that interesting? Are you listening, kids? So, didn't say car, he said home. That's quite a challenge, isn't it? But boy, what a blessing it is if we can help children to get into a home. That's one of the great expenditures or hurdles in an economy to give. But you know, if we just save and save and save for ourselves and we don't understand an overall stewardship of it, well then we're really failing to be vessels who are investing for the future as God would want us to. And believe me, beloved, I'd love to be a 30 and out, or a 35 and out, or a 62 retiree, or a 55 retiree. So, but I don't know that that's really part of what we would say God desires or God's will. Fourthly, we should seek to help fellow Christians first and foremost. And that's something we need to think about in our stewardship, helping fellow Christians. We are so bombarded these days with the television and the media about the needs of children, so on and so forth. Feed the hungry and food for the children. Do you know that that's over a $500 million a year ministry? $500 million. And we've got to make sure that there's a sense of accountability. Number 5, everybody should give according to their ability. And finally, we must exercise stewardship over all things in which we are entrusted by God. Paul was asking the Corinthians, who were fairly well off. Corinth was a thriving city. It was a commercial city. It was a port city. It was a city in which a lot of trade and a lot of business moved through. And he said, you know what? You need to prayerfully consider, individually, personally, how you might want to help the saints of Jerusalem. Nine 5, where Paul affirms the ministry of Titus and his fellow workers in this ministry of grace or giving to the saints and to the churches of Jerusalem. In 2 Corinthians 8:16, he says this, "But thanks be to God who puts the same earnestness on your behalf in the heart of Titus." Paul, this is the third time in this epistle that Paul breaks forth with words of thanksgiving to God. And I think that ultimately it's because Paul knows that only God can put something into the heart of a person. Now, that person obviously has to be cooperative. That person obviously has to be receptive. But if a person does not want to listen to God, if a person does not want to accept the words or the work of God, it's not going to be done. And they can refuse that. But Paul thanks God. He says, because God put the same earnestness, the same love and care and concern for the Corinthians into the heart of Titus that was in Paul's heart. And we've been through the Corinthian epistles enough to understand that the Corinthians were not an easy people to love. Loving the Christians of Corinth was not a natural thing. That was something that had to come from God. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, Paul reminds us of how this happens. Paul said, "I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but it's Christ who lives in me. The life which I now live by faith in this flesh or in this earthly body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. The only way that spiritual living and spiritual qualities take place in a person's life is through the regeneration and indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit and the life of Jesus Christ within us. Philippians chapter 2, verse 12, Paul said it this way, "So then, my beloved, just as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for your good pleasure." Paul understood that this love, this care, and this concern that flowed from the heart of Titus could only have come from the work of God in his heart and life. Verse 17, he says, "For he not only accepted our appeal," Paul made an appeal to Titus for this particular ministry, but he says, "but being himself very earnest, very diligent, he has gone to you of his own accord, of his own free will." This was something that Titus not only volunteered to do, but that he was willing and desirous to do. Now, this was a significant commitment on the part of Titus, for it was dangerous travel to go from Macedonia, where he was, down to Corinth, where he had to go, and to travel about to the different churches in the area, the highways and the byways. For Titus to say, "Yes, Paul, I will go. Not only will I go, but I want to go. I desire to go. I want to be a part of this ministry," meant that Titus was receptive to the will of God and willing to step out, because this was a commitment to put oneself in harm's way. Verse 18, he says, "We have sent along with him the brother whose fame in the things of the gospel has spread through all the churches. And not only this, but he has also been appointed by the churches to travel with us in this gracious work, in this collection of the offerings, which is being administrated by us for the glory of the Lord himself and to show our readiness." Now, we don't know who this brother whose fame in the things of the gospel had spread throughout all the churches. Paul doesn't give us his name. Whoever he is, they all knew him. He was very well known. When he arrived with them, they all would have known who he was, but we don't know who he is or was. Some have said Luke, some have said Barnabas, some have said Apollos, some have said Mark, some have said Erastus, some have said Silas. You can throw in all kinds of names. We're just guessing. Acts chapter 20 and verse 4 does tell us a group of men who were in this collection ministry. There was Sopater of Berea. There was Aristarchus and Sondas of Thessalonica. There was Gaius from Derbe, and Timothy, and Tychicus, and Trophimus of Asia. So there was a good collection from the different regions of people, because this was a large collection, a large offering. And so you wanted representatives from all the different churches so that there would be honesty, integrity, and a good report back. So whoever this person was, they were appointed by the churches. The word appointed actually refers to the raising of the hands. I can only imagine that they had a meeting of the churches, the people that were involved, and they said, "Look, we need to appoint a man or men to make these travels. They're dangerous travels. This is something that's very important, takes a lot of responsibility. We want somebody that we can trust. Who do you think?" And somebody said, "How about so-and-so? How about so-and-so? Can I hear a second?" I don't know if they had a second back then. I know Robert's Rules of Order go way back, but I don't know if it goes back that far. But then they voted and they appointed this person whom they trusted. And the purpose of this gift was to bring glory to the Lord and to show their eagerness to help others. Verse 20, he says, "Taking precautions so that no one will discredit us in our administration of this generous gift." I like the NIV here. I think it captures the idea when it says, we want to avoid any criticism. Taking precautions. We wanted to avoid any criticism. People are very quick to accuse others, I find, of financial fraud or mismanagement. And that might be because a lot of times there is financial fraud and mismanagement. A lot of times there is not the accountability, there is not the openness, there is not the management that is necessary. And of course we in the United States have seen these great abuses, not just in corporate America, but in churches as a whole also. And so Paul says, we are going to avoid any criticism. We will not be discredited because of this. We are going to administrate this gift in a proper way. Verse 21, for we regard for what is honorable, for we have regard